Somehow we survived the Black Friday crushing crowds, punching each other for discount crockpots, and we can now settle into the introverted shopping of our Cyber Monday here on the Paperback Warrior podcast.
Welcome to the Paperback Warrior podcast. My name is Eric. I'm here with my broadcast partner, Tom. Paperback Warrior is the internet's finest resource for reviews and discussions of vintage genre fiction from the 20th century. Every day we review vintage paperbacks on our blog, paperbackwarrior.com, and we do this weekly podcast on Mondays to tell you the stories behind these old books and the people who wrote them. Let me throw it over to Tom to tell you what we have in store for you this week. Tom, you over there?
Yes, I am calling this episode our Holiday Buyer's Guide, where we're going to discuss vintage paperback gifts you can get others, but also provide your family a proper answer to the very difficult question, what would you like for Christmas? In our reviews section, I'm going to be talking about a 1973 police procedural novel called The Girl in the Trunk by Bruce Cassidy. What are you reviewing this week, Eric?
I'm going to be reviewing Adam Steele No. 5, Gun Run by Terry Hartnett.
All right. So before we get into the Christmas shopping spirit, Eric, we need to do some housekeeping, right?
Correct. So this is episode 71 of the podcast, and it's the last day of November 2020. Conventional wisdom in the world of podcasting is that listener numbers kind of plummet for the month of December. No one listens to podcasts between Thanksgiving and New Year's. I took a long look at our analytics from last year, and that really bears out. I don't know what the heck you guys are listening to in December, but it ain't us.
We just can't compete, Eric, with the Hallmark Christmas movies on basic cable or the wall-to-wall Christmas carols on FM radio. Maybe if you and I could harmonize better, we could bust out some a cappella versions of Silent Night that will keep our old men listeners riveted for the next 4 episodes.
I think that's going to scare them off permanently.
Yeah, probably. Good point.
So the upshot is that the podcast is going to take a partial hiatus for the month of December.
Yeah, but we don't want you to forget about us altogether, so our podcast feed will still have a release every Monday. A couple of those releases will be reruns of old episodes for which I will record a new intro with some commentary or something else that'll keep you interested and make it fresh. And then you'll hear an old episode. We have some surprise content also for a couple of the weeks as well. And these are going to be unnumbered episodes posted on our websites, in social media, or whatever podcast app you're using to listen to us right now.
Since we launched the podcast, our listener numbers have grown. We're now at about 400 listeners a week, and it stands to reason that many of our listeners have not gone back to the early episodes to listen to what we were doing then. So you're going to give it a chance to hear some of the old content in December without having to dive into the archives yourself.
And for the superfans out there who have already heard every episode, we're going to have some new content on the front of these greatest hits episodes. And again, I have some new voices who are going to be talking about old books for a couple of these episodes. I think you're going to like that too. We're lucky that our podcasts are basically, the episodes are basically evergreen, since we're mostly discussing books from 50 plus years ago. An episode from 2018 is just as relevant or irrelevant today as it was back then. You may need to get used to our inferior sound quality back then and the fact that we've just become better broadcasters over the course of 71 episodes, but the quality of the books we're discussing never changes, and that's really what it's about for us.
And if all that sounds like a total nightmare to you, we hope you join us for a class reunion on Monday, January 4th, 2021. We're going to be back here for weekly episodes beginning with our Best of 2020, where we'll count down the finest books we reviewed this year. With the exception of Christmas week, the blog at paperbackwarrior.com will continue having new reviews on our normal schedule. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter to see what the daily posting will be.
Know that while we won't be doing weekly podcasts in December, Eric and I are going to be reading, writing, and recording content for you to listen to in 2021. It's going to be a great year for both the blog and the show. So, you ready for the feature, Eric?
Let's do it, man.
Okay, transition me. All right, so this is our holiday buyer's guide feature. But before we get into this, I want to define the problem that we're trying to solve this episode. Tell me, Eric, you like vintage paperbacks. We're actually recording this in your library right now, surrounded by the vintage paperbacks, which make me jealous because your library is getting to be just about as good as mine. And we normally record at my place, and you've seen my library, and you know what I like. So when someone asks you what you want for Christmas, what do you say?
Books. I always say books, Tom. Always. You'd be an idiot not to.
Yeah, but tell me about how does that work for you? Because when you ask for a book, do people understand what you want and where are they going to get these books and all that?
Yeah, I mean, in any social gathering, or I don't necessarily know those people I'm hanging out with, I try to avoid my hobby altogether. I mean, that's bad, right? But it always seems to come up at some point, and the annoying stranger will ask me if I've read, I don't know, like The Girl Who Saw Herself in the Mirror on a Train by a Hornet's Nest, and I'll say no, and then they tell me how much they loved it, and it's exactly the kind of book I need in my life because, you know, they know me so much, since we met 14 minutes ago. But the absolute worst is when that person shows up somehow again, and they produce the book that they talked about for an hour, and they gift it to you, they hope to hear your thoughts like tomorrow, when they think that you spent the whole night glued to it as much as they were. It sucks, Tom, and I hate myself a little bit because I'm so selfish to not want to spend time reading something that means that much to them. But, you know, when we talk about gifts, book gifts can be agony.
Unless it's a specific book I asked my dad to buy me as a gift because he has no idea what to get me, I get so much anxiety about receiving a book as a gift because most people just don't understand the books that I like. And maybe they have some sense that I like crime fiction, for example, and sometimes they try to give me a contemporary mystery hardcover by a best-selling author, and it's nothing that I want or will ever read. And I mean, I appreciate the gesture, and I know that people are just trying to be kind, but now I'm saddled with this book that I don't want and I'm never going to read. And God help me if it's the giver's favorite book ever, and it would mean the world to them if I actually read it. But when I receive a book as a gift and it's nothing I want, I feel like I'm being taken hostage by them.
Right, and when they do give me something like that, and they ask for my feedback, like, you know, months later, I'm thankful that a lot of the books that they give me have already been made into Hollywood blockbusters, and I can watch that and recap.
Cheat code, yeah. I often resort to asking people when they want to give me a gift for an Amazon gift card, which at least gives me the flexibility to eventually buy something I will like. But gift cards just aren't really a psychically gratifying gift for the giver, at least. We buy a ton from Amazon in my family, and money's fungible. So you give me a gift card so I can go buy a book. It's going to end up being used to replace like a broken wooden spoon for the kitchen or something like that. If there was any truth, the gift giver would probably just get a thank you card thanking them for the anti-jock itch powder that their gift card actually was used to purchase.
It's tough. I mean, gift cards are so anonymous, and sometimes they can show your lack of knowledge about that person. And it isn't that you don't care, but you just don't know what that person is really like behind closed doors. Like you could provide a beautiful scented candle, but it can really suck if the person has allergies to, you know, strong aromas. Material things are risky, which makes the gift card such an easy out in the game of gift giving. It's this cold-shouldered way of saying, you know, you mean the world to me, and I'm awarding you with this tiny plastic square to prove it.
Right. I mean, there's a poverty of imagination associated with gift cards. But anyway, so for the feature today, I want to bring the listeners' attention to some vintage fiction answers to that question. What do you want for Christmas? By the same token, these suggestions can also be used by you to burn up the Amazon gift card that you're likely to receive from your exasperated family members. I'm mostly going to focus on vintage paperbacks that have been re-released over the past couple months by reprint houses, and that's because most people have a psychological block against giving someone a used book as a gift. Have you ever seen that phenomenon in action, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a slippery slope for people. When you buy someone a gift, you generally want it to be a crisp, sparkling piece of plastic or glass right off the Chinese assembly line. And that's the idea. It's like newness equals friendship. This is a brand new item that I'm giving you. So people tend to shy away from used items as gifts because it makes them feel cheap or even dirty handing over something that's been used by another human.
Yeah, all I want are used books, but
Right.
but I also can entrust the people in my life to actually get me the used book that I want and don't already have. But I understand that for them, buying me a used book is like buying me like used socks or used shoes, and it's just the whole thing feels icky to them. The good news, though, is that we are currently in 2020 living in a reprint paradise. There are so many reprint houses out there snatching up these old paperbacks and putting them out again as new editions for modern readers to enjoy. It's like an arms race between publishers like Hard Case Crime, Stark House, Wolfpack Books, Brash Books, Wildside Press, Bold Venture, Altus Press, Cutting Edge, Armchair Fiction, and on and on and on. These reprint houses are like cultural anthropologists trying to find the best stuff from the 20th century to reprint today.
And nearly all of them listen to this podcast and they read the Paperback Warrior blog looking for ideas. We've seen it happen again and again. We find this obscure old book from the 1950s and, we discuss it here on the show, and a couple months later, it's miraculously being reprinted with a new cover. We've become the research and development arm of the vintage reprint publishing industry.
I'm proud of that, actually. Sometimes I read and fall in love with an old paperback, and I feel guilty that we're steering our listeners to something that they really can't get their hands on easily or that they're going to have to spend a fortune to read. And so these reprint houses largely solve that problem.
With most of the reprints, you're going to lose that great cover art, but ultimately it's the story inside that really matters.
Yeah, so with that, let's go into some reprints for your holiday shopping wish list. Eric, you read and reviewed the first installment of a series called The Pro by Richard Curtis. Take a second to tell us about that series.
The author Richard Curtis was a successful literary agent and author who wrote this adventure series in the 1970s called The Pro. The hero of the book is a sports agent named Dave Bolt. He represents professional athletes in basketball, football, baseball, hockey, and other sports. Unofficially, he's kind of a troubleshooter for a number of pro sports teams. The debut is called The 3 Million Turnover from 1974, and it's been reprinted with other books in the series by Wolfpack Press. In the book, Bolt is representing a pro basketball star who's being held for a $3 million ransom. Now, Bolt needs to investigate the ransom and save his client. And I really liked the book. It reminded me of Robert Parker's Spencer character. If you or your intended gifting target are into professional sports at all, I think this will be a perfect gift.
All right, so tell the listener the title and author again.
The series is called The Pro. The author is Richard Curtis, and the first installment is The 3 Million Turnover. Now, 3 of the books in the series have been reprinted by Wolfpack Publishing. You can find them on Amazon or buy directly at wolfpackpublishing.com. What do you have?
Okay, so I'm going to shift gears to a reprint publishing house called Cutting Edge Press, which is owned and operated by best-selling author Lee Goldberg. He's been on a tear this year, reprinting vintage paperbacks from the 1950s and 1960s, some of which are Kindle only, and others are available as trade paperbacks and or Kindle books. Now, Cutting Edge has been reprinting the entire catalog of the books by former CIA operative and Watergate burglar Howard Hunt that he wrote under the name of Robert Dietrich. Now, both you and I have been reading and loving the Dietrich books, and anyone who likes classic crime noir or hard-boiled private eye fiction should definitely check those out. In fact, I just finished a standalone sexy noir novel by Dietrich that I reviewed last week called One for the Road that was really outstanding. One of the best books I read this year. Anyway, another author that Cutting Edge has been reprinting is named Richard Himmel, and we did a feature on him back in August on episode 57. In the 1950s, Himmel wrote this great sexy private eye series, which is really starring a Chicago attorney by the name of Johnny Maguire. The first book was called I'll Find You, and the second was actually a spy story starring Maguire called The Chinese Keyhole. I reviewed both of these books and raved about them on the blog, and I also tracked down Himmel's son, John, for an interview, and he was really great and gracious with his time, and it's a good article. Anyway, after the interview and the reviews, Lee Goldberg reached out for me and said that he wants to reprint Richard Himmel's back catalog. He asked me to put him in touch with John Himmel, the son of the author, who basically controls the family's literary estate. So I connect these two guys, and they hit it off. Next thing I know, Cutting Edge is reprinting everything Himmel ever wrote. Not just the Johnny Maguire books, but his standalone thrillers like 1982's Echo Chambers, and his sexy offbeat novel Beyond Desire, which was a Fawcett Gold Medal original from 1952. if you go to Amazon and search Richard Himmel, you're going to see all the offerings. And he was a largely forgotten American author who was really brought back to life by this podcast.
I think that's something to be really proud of.
Yeah, I agree. And so, again, Richard Himmel's his name, and there have been a lot of reprints, and he's worth checking out. And you can get his books pretty affordably because Cutting Edge Press is not looking to rip anyone off. They're just bringing books back to life. Anyway, why don't you go ahead and do one?
Back in July, I reviewed a book called Death's Lovely Mask by an author named John Flagg from 1954. It was the fourth book in an espionage series starring an OSS operative named Hart Muldoon. It was a European-based adventure taking place in the world of princes and queens and countesses with shadowy oil deals and whatnot. Now, John Flagg was a pseudonym for a playwright named John Guerin. I'll be honest that I didn't really like Death's Lovely Mask. I'm not really partial to espionage and intrigue stories taking place in a Downton Abbey-style setting, but I also know that some people really latch onto the trappings of mid-century Europe and Egypt. In December, Starkhouse is re-releasing the first two Hart Muldoon adventures by John Flagg in one trade paperback volume. The books are called Woman of Cairo and Dear Deadly Beloved. The volume also has an introduction from Nicholas Littlefield, and you can grab a copy from Amazon or on the Starkhouse Books website.
All right, cool. Since we're talking about Starkhouse, they've had a great release year. The holiday releases also have some real special stuff. One of my favorite discoveries of 2020 is this obscure 1950s author named Lorenz Heller. Now, Lorenz is spelled Lorenz, and I read and reviewed two of his books earlier this year, and he's just an awesome writer. Well, just in time for the holidays, Starkhouse is releasing another double volume of Lorenz Heller books. The novels in this new volume are Hideout and I Get What I Want. Of the two, I'm most interested in reading Hideout. It's a character-based thriller taking place in Florida about a gangster and his crew who are hiding out together in this house 20 miles from the nearest town without a phone while a racketeering investigation closes in on the mobster. Now, the gangster seems a little stressed and unbalanced, and everyone locked up with him in this house starts to turn on one another. I really tend to enjoy, Eric, these claustrophobic, kind of limited setting novels that are taking place in like just one place. And I'm sure this one is awesome. It's called Hideout by Lorenz Heller, originally released in 1953. The other book in the same volume released by Starkhouse is called I Get What I Want from 1956. It's about a guy named Jeff who becomes obsessed with a girl. In order to curry favor with her, he takes on a job on a boat crew smuggling liquor for her crazy Uncle Buster. Heller really wrote good maritime adventures, and he always focuses on the characters and not like a bunch of boating nomenclature, and so I'm sure this one's really solid. Anyway, the author again is Lorenz Heller, and the new double volume released is Hideout and I Get What I Want. The reprint's from Starkhouse, and you can either get it on Amazon or the Starkhouse website. I gave you a new release of an old book earlier tonight, Eric. Tell the audience what that is.
Starkhouse owns a paperback imprint called Black Cat Books, where they republish old crime novels in the mass-market pocket book size paperbacks that fit our shelves better than the big trade paperbacks do. This new release from Black Cat is called Cut Me In by Jack Carney. The original date of publication on this one was 1959, and it looks like Black Cat is using the original cover art. The quick research I was able to do indicates that the author, Jack Carney, worked in the New York City District Attorney's Office, and his novels were mostly police dramas and crime stories taking place in Manhattan's Lower East Side. This reprint, called Cut Me In, is about a crooked cop who's torn between his lust for the good life and his loyalty to the family of the woman he loves. I read a review for this book on the blog of author and friend of the show, James Reasoner, and he liked the book a lot. I hope to read it and review it next year and let you know my thoughts, but for gifting purposes, it's a brand new reprint, and again, it's called Cut Me In by Jack Carney, and it's also available from Amazon, or you can get it directly from the Starkhouse website.
All right, cool. I think we have time for one more before we do our reviews, and I saved this one for last because it's such a weird product. Your hands are full right now, but I want to hand this to you, and I want you to describe it to the listener. You have to take this out of the plastic, and it's in plastic for a very specific reason.
It's in plastic. Okay.
Yeah, okay, take it out.
Wow.
Describe what you're seeing first.
Okay. So it's a black cover on this thing. It's a paperback. It says Grizzly Pulp in gray, and then there's a number 1 in gold, and that's all you get on the black cover. It's just the fonts.
Right.
Now,
so you basically peel the black cover off the book.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I'm peeling the cover off, and that's a paperback, just your normal paperback-sized book inside. It says Nympho Lodge. That's the title. And it says the exciting first Toki Wedge thriller by Jack Lynn, and I guess the publisher is Grizzly Pulp. Is this a new book or?
Okay, so before I tell you what this is, open the book and take a look at and feel the paper that it's printed on.
Okay, this is odd.
Really weird product.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
what do you make of it?
The pages are like really soft and thin, like super thin.
What you are feeling, Eric, is wood pulp paper.
Oh, really?
When we talk about pulp fiction, this is literally fiction on pulp paper.
So what am I holding here? What is this?
Okay, now it looks like a porno novel.
It does.
All right, but it's not. I want to tell you about this book and the series that it's a part of. But first I want to tell you a little bit about the publisher and what he's trying to achieve. While it looks like a cheap porno novel, what you actually have in your hands is a modern reprint of a book from 1959. The author, Jack Lynn, is a pseudonym for a real guy named Max Vanderveer. There were at least 20 books in the Toki Wedge series. All were originally released by a low-end sleaze publisher out of Chicago called Novel Books, starting in 1959 and stretching into the 1960s. The main character, Toki Wedge, was a hard-boiled private eye who only stands 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighs 145 pounds. The books are told in first person by Toki, who drives a flashy Triumph convertible. Now, despite his small stature, the character of Toki gets laid a lot because he's big in other ways. It's basically a Shel Scott ripoff. The sex in the novels is very tame by today's standards, and the stories themselves are actually supposed to be really good, if you're into kind of over-the-top Mike Hammer and Shel Scott type of stuff. They were packaged as porno novels, but the content was something way less tawdry and really fun from what I'm told. For example, Nympho Lodge is really more about the lodge and less about the nymphos, and again, it's a 1959 novel. So this author, Max Vanderveer, he wrote a lot of short stories for Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine, Mike Shane Mystery Magazine. He also wrote for Girl from Uncle magazine. So he's got a pretty good pedigree as an author. And these are the kind of books that will have been lost forever if it weren't for this new upstart reprint house called Grizzly Pulp that is reprinting the Toki Wedge series starting with this Nympho Lodge book. And the one that you have in your hands there. So in Nympho Lodge, Toki gets hired as a bodyguard for a woman named Janice who believes that her husband is trying to kill her. Now, Toki's investigation into this threat takes place in a rural resort staffed by nymphomaniacs. Now, I intend to read it, but I think you need to be in the right mindset. This is not a crime fiction classic, but it has the potential to be a lot of fun. Now, the brains behind this outfit, Grizzly Pulp, is this guy by the name of Michael Monson, who I've been corresponding with via email. He's identified 6 Toki Wedge books for reprint, and he assures me that they're all wrapped up at the printer and ready to go. And each pulp paperback there costs $10. Now, Mr. Monson tells me that the decision to use actual pulp paper to reprint these books was a nod to the past, as well as a way to keep his costs down for him as the publisher. He doesn't sell the books on Amazon because Amazon takes a high piece of the action, so you're going to need to go to his website, grizzlypulp.com, to score a copy of this really weird little oddity. Now, if the first 6 titles do well, they plan to release more and kind of see where this goes. They also have cool Grizzly Pulp swag, including poker chips, and I got you this, a shot glass, a Grizzly Pulp shot glass. I'm not a drinker.
Oh, wow. Isn't that neat?
But you can have that. It's
Thank
my
you.
gift to you. I am personally pulling for Grizzly Pulp. I admire their punk rock, kind of do-it-yourself sensibility, and I hope our listeners visit grizzlypulp.com and throw some business their way. I'm really interested to see what this publisher does next.
I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah, it's really a cool idea, and he stumbled upon a series that really no one else had taken the time to reprint, and he's putting them out. So why don't you do your book review now?
All right. So This week I'm riding tall in the saddle with another violent Western entry by author Terry Hartnett. This one is Adam Steele number 5, Gun Run. And just a few days ago I read and reviewed the debut Edge book on the paperbackwarrior.com blog, and man, I just loved it. It was written by Hartnett as well, and Adam Steele and Edge are both written under the house name of George Gilman. Now, Hartnett also wrote Western series titles like The Undertaker, and I think he helped out on the Apache series, and a bunch of other Western and action-packed adventure novels. Now, earlier this year, I also read and reviewed the debut Adam Steele novel, Rebels and Assassins Die Hard, from 1974. So I just randomly grabbed another series installment from my shelf, and I ended up with this one, Gun Run, which is the 5th installment of the series. This book has Adam Steele taking a job riding shotgun on a passenger stagecoach headed through the desert around the Arizona, New Mexico, and Mexico borderlines. Of course, the stagecoach is taken over by a team of outlaws led by this greedy woman. Now, unbeknownst to Steele, the stagecoach actually had a fortune of loot hidden under it. And the gang steals the loot, and Adam Steele, he doesn't really care about that. The missing money means nothing to him. Instead, he's focused on the rifle that was stolen from him during the holdup. It's a lever-action rifle that was gifted to his father by Abraham Lincoln. It even has this nice inscribed message on it. And of course, Steele's father was murdered in the series debut, and the rifle means a lot to him. So the idea of bandits taking it really pisses him off. Guys, do you remember those awesome movie scenes with Indiana Jones hanging onto his hat as wild villains and jungle enemies and desert mercenaries attempt to kill him?
Hell yeah.
Yes, this book is just like that. Steele heads through the desert with nothing but a knife, and he ends up facing Apache warriors, Mexican soldiers, Mexican guerrillas, as bad things after very bad things just continue to happen to him. He's 1 foot in the grave in every chapter, but eventually finds himself facing the gang in a small town. There is this one scene in this book that is absolutely one of the funniest things I've ever read in a Western, and it might just be me. It was just so simple and basic, but it was presented so well by the author. And it basically amounts to Adam Steele being this dirty, smelly bum who's just emerged from the desert mountains after like days in the mountains without any water and trying to get his rifle back. And he finally makes it into this town, and he makes his way to the town's general store, and he begins heating up his hands over the wood stove. He's basically in complete survival mode at this point, just trying to determine where the next meal is going to come from. The sheriff, fearing that this guy's a no-good hoodlum, comes over and is basically explaining that the town is filled with all these good, honest, decent people, and that nothing bad ever happens here, and that violence is a big no-no, and that Steele needs to just get what he needs and absolutely not create any ruckus of any kind. Not 2 seconds after the sheriff says this, Steele sees a consumer walking by the store's doorway and quickly shoots and kills the guy right in front of the sheriff.
Oh, man.
The sheriff is standing there absolutely speechless, and he just stands there in complete shock. But Hartnett writes this whole scene so well, and it's one of those scenes, Tom, where you feel like you were in the room when this just happened. It was amazing, and it was just a real testament to Hartnett as a storyteller. Needless to say, I love this book. If you love violent westerns or want a really fun adventure-styled story, then Gun Run is a mandatory read. I just can't say enough good things about it. Just an extraordinary character that is really short on words and heavy on weapons. This was just great. And again, it's Adam Steele, number 5, Gun Run by Terry Hartnett, writing as George Gilman. And I think, isn't the Adam Steele books out as ebooks by Piccadilly?
I don't think so.
No, they're not out.
I know the Edge books are.
Yeah.
I don't know if the Steele books are.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah, but anyway, he really captured lightning in a bottle with those 2 series.
Yeah,
they're iconic. They'll be around forever. My review is another reprint of an old book. It's called The Girl in the Trunk by Bruce Cassidy from 1973. It was recently reprinted and they preserved the cover art by Bold Venture Press, another really great kind of high-end reprint house. I read and reviewed a book by Bruce Cassidy a couple of years ago called The Buried Motive, about an insurance investigator named Cash Madigan, and I thought it was just average. But I'm glad I didn't give up on Bruce Cassidy, because this late career book, The Girl in the Trunk, was really something great. The entire paperback takes place over about 12 hours in Honolulu, Hawaii. Jim Egan is a brutal but effective white Honolulu police detective who's always ready to bruise his knuckles on a mugger's jaw. He's basically in perpetual dirty Harry mode, this cop. Meanwhile, Ki Awana is a young, handsome, undercover Hawaiian cop with personal charm, a high IQ, and the ability to build rapport that makes him successful. This book is a buddy cop story where a violent white cop is forced to team up with a charming Hawaiian cop to solve a crime. And so you got to throw in a lot of mistrust with them and kind of cultural tension, and you get the idea. So the underlying crime is actually a big embezzlement case, which leads to a dead, naked lady found in the trunk of a car. There's also this cool disaster movie element to the plot because an earthquake undersea triggers a tsunami wave, which is working its way across the Pacific Ocean and headed for Hawaii. So it's up to Egan and Key to solve this crime and catch the bad guy before Oahu is washed away by a tidal wave. The author throws in a variety of subplots, one involving the chief of detectives whose daughter embraces the counterculture of Hawaiian sovereignty and the hippie grifters working in that movement. Meanwhile, Egan's brutal treatment of Waikiki muggers is stirring up controversy with the local newspaper that the department doesn't need. The ensemble cast reminded me a little bit of Ed McBain's 87th Precinct books, kind of meeting up with Hawaii Five-0 in the setting. I lived in Hawaii for 7 years before moving to Florida in 2016, and to his credit, Cassidy really gets Honolulu culture and topography pretty accurate, with all the right landmarks in the right places. He also does a commendable job of profiling the mixed plate of various ethnicities comprising Hawaii's local populace. Honolulu has real urban problems. There's muggings, poverty, and racial unrest, and it was really captured well in this paperback. And the book never falls into the trap of overplaying the focus on the beach culture and with cartoonish Hawaiian characters. Somehow, Cassidy really grasped local Hawaiian culture with great accuracy. The book, again, is called The Girl in the Trunk, and it's just a really solid crime novel. It's a well-written murder mystery, police procedural, tropical island adventure, and disaster novel, all rolled up into 189 pages. And so what's not to like? You can check it out on Amazon or at the website for Bold Venture Press. And I think that about wraps up the year for us, Eric. Why don't you talk us out?
I am. And just real quick on the Adam Steele.
Yeah.
Yes, the first 27 books are available as ebook. If you have Kindle Unlimited, they're free. They're $0.
Oh, man.
And then if you want to buy them, I think they're $3. That's
a no-brainer.
It's done by Lobo Press. You ever heard of those guys?
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised because I thought the Piccadilly had the Edge books.
The Adam Steele look very similar to the Edge books with new covers, the cartoony covers. But anyway, there you go.
Lobo.
If you want Gun Run, there you go. As Tom said, that's the last new episode for 2020. But check out our podcast feed every Monday through the end of the year for our greatest hits with some new content from Tom, as well as special features from others. We also have an archive of over 70 episodes discussing the best fiction of the 20th century that you can visit if you miss the sound of our voices. Meanwhile, reviews of old books and cover art scans are always available at paperbackwarrior.com. On behalf of Tom, this is Eric saying we will see you in January.
Enjoy the holidays.